Sure if I selected to go live, so I'm gonna give it like 5 minutes as a just in case, or a couple minutes as a just in case. Yeah, because usually I see people on here, so I will wait a few moments before starting. And I don't know, since I'm here, why there's an error loading comments again. So while we wait a few minutes, I'm gonna double check and see if I can. Okay, I'm just gonna start. I didn't put a reminder out for this week, so it's possible that I am just by myself today, which is perfectly fine. Today is Saturday, sorry, September 12th, 2020. Dealing with some pain issues today, so bear with me. Yeah, today's live session is on grief. I wanted to do this one specifically because my son's birthday is towards the end of the month, and it's always hard for me on his birthday and his death date. So I wanted to explain a little bit about grief. We tend to think that grief is going to be somebody who looks completely sad or maybe crying all the time. That's not what grief looks like all the time. Um, yes, that can absolutely happen. But for most people, grief looks like their normal face, especially in a world that's not grieving with them. Because when somebody dies, no matter what that relationship is, people are tend to be sad for, the initial hearing of it, maybe a few days after, maybe a month or so after, maybe a year or so after. Um, and then for some, it never goes away. And you may not realize it because they're not crying their eyes out, because they're not um, depressed, or at least visually look depressed. They are truly people that are just living, trying to do the best they can in a world that's not grieving with them. Because unless it's a significant death, the grief process tends to go through its motions, and then you have your triggers like everything else. But for somebody, when it's typically out of the natural order of things, such as me losing my son and other parents that have lost their children, no matter what their death is from, it's out of the natural order for the life that we live in the society that we live in. Prior to modern medicine, kids died all the time. And doesn't mean it was any less painful. It just was different because people prior to modern medicine didn't take for granted that their children wouldn't die before them, or that their sibling wouldn't die before them, depending on their age. So there's many different levels to this, and because of that, no one person is going to grieve the exact same way. And it's important to remember that, because you can't put people into certain boxes of expectations. We shouldn't be doing that to begin with. And, as a parent, I know I failed at that, because we don't know better until we know. And so our own expectations could always create that person's expectations to fail from. And if we're putting expectations on people, no matter the label, we're setting that person up for failure, because in the end, people are people, and people experience things the way they do and how they're going to experience them. So I wanted to talk about grief, one, because I'm very sad this month. Two, because a lot of people look at me and they are shocked to hear that my son died. And they're shocked to hear that he died only about 3.5 years ago. 3 years, 3 months, something like that. And they're surprised by it because I don't fit the image and stereotype of a grieving mother. And again, that's that expectation that other people have. When it comes to grief, it doesn't matter that label. It's painful. And if you loved something or someone and they die and they're not around anymore, that pain and that grief is just as real as me losing my son. Because I'll have people say, I lost, my mom, but it's nothing like losing your son. No, it hurts and it's painful. And it's just as painful as me losing my son. When I lost my Bailey, my yellow lab, 3 months after my son, it was equally as painful as losing my son. Now you could think, well, it was only 3 months after your son died. Yeah, but at the same time, I try to use and instead of but, and at the same time, I had been trying to prepare myself to lose Bailey for 3 years prior to his death. I knew it was going to be painful. So, could it be contributing factors of my son? Absolutely. And it's contributing because I loved him. And losing him was equally as painful. So, this is when we see the pain, right? We see when somebody's in pain. But prior to that, the dying on the inside, it's the silent suffering. And that silent suffering is also what a lot of our folks that are suicidal go through. I saw a meme go around the other day. It actually wasn't a meme, it was a photo, I should say it correctly, of graffiti on a wall someone had put, I'm not sure where, but it said, I was thinking about killing myself, and you're complaining about the dirty dishes. And the thing is no one's at fault there. The person complaining about their life or some situation doesn't know that the other person is contemplating killing themselves or is struggling because they lost their kid, they lost their dog, they lost their cat, they lost their frog. It seems silly to say those words, but to a person that is real pain. It's something that they loved and took care of and appreciate it. Same thing with parents and grandparents and siblings. Labels are labels. As you guys know, when I talk about labels in general, labels are labels. What we feel inside is what's more important than that label. So, when you come across somebody who is grieving, and they're grieving because maybe you just found out, maybe, they told you and they're crying or whatever, the best thing to do, in all honesty, is say nothing. It's a nice thought to say my prayers are with you. It's a nice thought to say my love is with you, my energy is with you, my hugs with you, this is with you. It's all nice thoughts. But the person grieving could care less in that moment. They could be pissed off. They could just be hurting so bad and grieving so bad that just words don't even make it into their conscious brain. So say nothing. And ask if you can give them a hug. Ask if you can reach out and touch their hand. unless you know the person well enough to just give them hugs. Like when it comes to me, just touch me, just hug me. You don't need my permission. But in today's world, let's ask for permission first, unless you know the person pretty well. The touch, even though it could be wonderful, it can be very painful as well in that moment, or cause some triggers that maybe the person's not prepared to handle. The most important thing after is say the person's name. Say the animal's name. If you don't know it, ask. Yes, it could cause that person to cry, could cause that person to get angry, could cause that person to get upset, whatever emotion that's on the surface trying to come out. It could cause all those things. I miss my son. I miss my Bailey. I even occasionally miss my cat, who died a year later. I had to think about it. I don't think it was the same year. But I want to hear their names. Because it shows me people remember. And that I'm not the only one who remembers. It's the weirdest thing. It's like music to your ears. Yet at the same time, when people don't do it, when they start, it's like a shock. But when you do it enough, the shock isn't there anymore. And it's like, yeah, Morgan, tell the stories that you know or you remember. Even if it's something that you feel the person may not want to hear, or maybe it shines that person into a bad light of some sort. In the end, it doesn't matter. The person just wants to hear it. Because last time I checked, we've all made mistakes. We've all said things or done things we're not proud of when we look back. Some maybe worse than others. Yes, absolutely. But in the end, nobody's perfect. And I'm a firm believer. If you keep trying to be better for yourself, not anybody else, but yourself, and you keep trying, it doesn't matter how many times you fall. It doesn't matter how many times you fail. You're trying. And that's what's important, because you haven't given up. So I want to hear all the times my son failed. Because then I'll be hearing it. So, back to grief. I was asked once from a true, professional, just, wanting to understand, especially if they have somebody in front of them that is grieving, especially the loss of their child. She had asked me, how do you move through it? How do you get past it? And I had to think about it a little bit. And I realized it's not about moving through it. It's not about moving past it. It moves with you. It might change, it might shift. It may not feel as compressing, but it's still there. It will always be there. Always. My phone was about to break, so I forgot to put it on Do Not Disturb. Let me do that real quick. It's always there, and it will always be there. Even somebody who's lost their grandma, yes, it's good stuff, and you have good memories after that, and you might spend, your entire life not really kind of sad about it. But then it just takes looking through photo albums or getting married and wishing your grandma was there. And that trigger comes right back. So it's always there. It's just what degree of pain is it to the person. And that's why it's so important for us as a society to understand we don't know what the person in front of us is going through. Because they may not share it. And it could be grief, it could be addiction, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be sexual trauma, it could be not feeling good enough, it could be, being told you're wrong, or that, somebody that you look up to hates you. It could be so many things. And just taking a step of stop and think, what might this person be going through that I have no idea? And when you do that, even if that other person is freaking out or crying their eyes out, you gave them a moment to get some of that pressure out of them, because we are great at sucking things up and shoving it down. We've spent our whole lives doing it. I know I was raised, just to suck it up. It's okay. It'll be fine. I did that to Morgan in some ways. Looking back, saying, oh, if you're not bleeding, you're okay. Especially when, they fall and get hurt. Oh, you're not bleeding, you're okay. That's the physical aspect. It still hurts. Things still hurt. But in moments somebody says that, they immediately dismiss that pain. And when that happens, it's shoved down. I see that the light changed on my screen. So there's definitely more spirits around me. So I guess that's the haze that's caused the screen to change color. But best thing that you can do for anybody, especially those that are grieving, is not try and understand it. Not try to fix it. Not try to compare to somebody else. Just be. Just be there with that person. Let them feel what they're feeling. Let them release the pressure cap and get some of what's inside out. Because it helps with stress. It helps with everything. Their physical body inside as well. So, one of the other things that helped me with my son, outside of hearing his name said by others, crying when I need to, dealing with what I need to when I need to, in a world that's not grieving with me. I'm sorry. Most people aren't. My family, in some ways, yes. At this point, not so much. Most likely when I'm grieving, when I'm crying, and they're around me. Important dates. I'm sure they are. But from a day to day, out of sight, out of mind is a real thing. For me, it's not. But one of the other things that helped me was while I'm getting my master's, which I'm almost to the end of it in mental health counseling so I can help others with addictions and help kids spiritually who see ghosts to avoid substance use, as well as suicide and things like that. I came across the theory of the ABC model. And I think I talked about this in a different video. But when I came across it, it was like a light bulb that just went off in my head. And what it is that the A of our grief and our emotions and our thought process is the action. What happened? And yet we think that the action causes the consequences. Makes sense, right? It's all things that would make sense, that this happened, so now I feel this way, right? This occurred, so now this is the consequence of said action. But what actually happens is the middle part, the B action, that we skip over consciously. Subconsciously, it's there. And identifying that action is what is important. So, for example, the action is my son died. The consequences, or the perceived consequences, is the sadness that I am in, the grief that I'm in, the internal physical pain, internal dysfunctions such as breast cancer and precancer of the uterus, all these things that I was never sick before losing my son. It was very rare I got sick. Now it's just one problem after another. But when I thought about it after hearing this theory, was what is the B action? The B action in this theory is the belief system around it. So what is the belief system of said action that's causing the consequences? And when I sat on my son's death, the belief system that was there was that I would die first. That was my belief system. My son would not die before I died, that he would bury me. And that's a very live, yeah, somebody must be walking their dog outside. But the belief action actually, for me, was that he wouldn't die. I died first. And that was very rational to me. Because why not? In modern technology, it's not common to lose kids. It's not. Yes, they still die of cancer. Yes, they still die of accidents. Yes, they still die of hit and runs and, many other things. Yes, they still die. But prior to modern conveniences and even modern technology, such as hit and runs and things like that, they still died. Fevers, infections, major life-threatening situations, including at birth. How many babies were breached and how many babies were stuck? How many babies have cords wrapped around their necks? How many moms died during childbirth because of complications along with their child? Death was a constant. Death of our children before modern medicine was a real thing, and one that a lot of people had to live through. But we've grown accustomed to not having such complications all the time. And when I realized that, the pain of losing him was a little less. I won't say it was, a miracle, because obviously, as you see, it's not. But it puts it a little bit into perspective as well. And by putting it into perspective, I'm able to pull myself out of just the pain And that why me? Why him? Especially why him? Especially the situations around his death. And I know these things. But yet consciously, it's hard to allow them to be. Because you hurt. So grief comes in many forms. There are many ways to move with grief. So that way, when the triggers happen, you're able to process those triggers. And you're able to release the pressure a little bit. So you can be okay for however long. The only other way that I can describe this so people can visually see it, and I wish I would have pulled the video in advance because then I could show it to you. But there's this great video out there that someone had put out there regarding grief. And what they do is they draw a circle. And within that circle, they say, this is your life in this moment. And then what they do is they say, now someone that is significant to you dies. So they color it in. And they make it a black circle. And then they say, life still goes on. Because life still does go on. Even if we're grieving silently. Even if we're not grieving silently. Life still goes on. New memories surface. New experiences occur. Whether they're good or bad, they occur. And what they say in this video is, it's with the black circle in the center, they now make a new big circle. And within that circle, they say these are where all the new memories are made. All the new experiences are had. The fun times, the bad times, no matter what. The life past that point in time when you lost somebody. But then when the trigger happens, their birth date, their death date, certain holidays, even in my case, the court case, or seeing a little boy who looked just like my son when he was that age, or an outfit he wore, or finding his Pokemon blanket. What ends up happening is that outer circle of memories and happiness and sadness and all that stuff you experienced since that death just shrinks a little bit and comes back to that moment of time when you hurt. And then you process those feelings if you can, and you do what you can to function again in a society that's not grieving with you. So when you do, your view expands again to these bigger outer memories that you have that will continue to grow until a trigger. And then your world shrinks back to that space. So when you think of it that way, how can you predict triggers? How can you identify when somebody's going to be grieving outside of the staple dates, death and birth? For me, Christmas is hard. For me, my birthday's hard. And not because he gave me anything special except for a hug and a kiss and said he loved me. It's more because for me, most of the time, I want to trade places with him. And my birthday is a reminder of that. That I'm alive and he's not. And I'm another year older and he's not here. It's identifying those patterns, identifying those triggers. For those that are grieving, so you can know it's going to be a hard day, a hard week, a hard month. And then working your schedule around that to allow yourself the time you need to grieve. Because even if it's 20 years, I know in 20 years, there are still days that this is what's going to happen to me. I'm not going to be delusional about that. So, I will take off work. I will be by myself if that's what I want. Or surround myself with people, which is what I do on his birthday and death date. I have a barbecue, so that way people can come and be around me. Tell me stories. Cry if they want. Have fun. So the day is not so lonely and hard. So, I didn't realize how much I needed to cry. So grief looks differently for everybody from an external perspective. And even at times differently internal. Most of us are walking around barely breathing. It's why physical problems start to happen. I feel like I have to tell myself to breathe most of the time. So, just be kind. Don't say anything. Just be there. Even if it's just a moment. If you're not around somebody and you want to say or reach out, just say, I'm here if you need anything. That's all. Nothing else. I'm here. If you need to cry, I'm here. You can cry at me. It gives that person permission to cry. When we think about it, a lot of us have been raised to not cry. Don't cry, you're fine. Don't cry, don't let this person see that they hurt you. Don't cry because it might make somebody else uncomfortable. And that might be true, but usually it's because they're uncomfortable because they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. So if you know, just reach out, touch their hand. Just be there and say, cry all you want. I'll cry with you. It's usually what happens to me. I'll cry with the person. Which absolutely helps them. Absolutely helps them. So, I wasn't prepared for this to be a cry fest, but I'm glad it is. And I've learned through losing my son, if you don't wipe your eyes when you're crying, they don't get extremely red and puffy. So that's a trick. Yeah. I feel a little better. The pain I was having was for something else that's still there. But I feel like I breathe a little bit better. The other thing for those that are spouses or partners or even just parents with other kids, make new memories. Make new traditions. Still incorporate some of the, old tradition, but don't make it all about the old tradition. especially for parents. That makes it harder because you're trying to fit into a box that doesn't work anymore. So think of something new and different. Come up with different ways to honor them. I'm currently in his bedroom where he died. I changed the color, I changed the flooring, I exposed the brick, but I painted his door the same color it was for the walls to pay homage to him because it's still his room. No matter how much I change it, it's still his room. So it's okay to make changes. It's okay to not make changes. It's whatever you as an individual needs. And even if it comes off harsh, tell people what you truly want from them. Even if it's to leave you the hell alone for a week or two. Don't check on me. I'm fine. Because you're not fine. But you're fine enough. If you're suicidal, that's different. Have that one person know a code word that when it's just too much and you text that word or you call that word or whatever it is that you come up with as a code, then that other person knows to drop everything and call you and make sure you're okay. Because nobody reads minds. They don't. Even me as a spiritual person, I don't read minds. Spirits will tell me what people are thinking, but I don't read them. So somebody standing in front of me, I don't know anything about you unless the spirits tell me everything about you or anything about you. Otherwise, I'm going off of your face, your words, your actions. And honestly, that's the way most people are in this world. So communicate. It's one of the biggest things. Your partners, your family, they tend to know your signs. My dad says that when he sees me getting upset, my nose turns red, which I can see it's red. So, but now I really am upset. But he said he could see it before the tears would come. Dave knows I just get quiet and I don't talk. But for somebody who doesn't know you very well, just tell them what you need. That's what's important. So, to sum it up, we could all be better at. The tears are just running into my mouth now, down the side of my face. We could all be better at being kinder to others. Absolutely. When somebody dies, just tell that person you're there, you're thinking of them. If they need anything, let you know. If you want to add in my thoughts and prayers or sending love and energy or whatever, you could do that. But don't be surprised if that person, unless they're extremely religious, don't really care to hear it because they're angry. Help that person figure out what the belief system is behind it so that they can process it a little different. Seek out other modalities. Therapist, a grief therapist, even just a grief support group, which I'm working on doing one under a charity I'm creating for Morgan called Morgan's Light. And in that, it's some free services for help, for assistance with addiction, and various other services through different modalities that has worked for me. Therapy, groups, although the groups really haven't worked for me, which is why I'm creating my own to offer for free for people to join. Getting MFR treatments, getting spiritual treatments, hearing from our loved ones. There's many modalities out there. You don't know which one's going to help you. But the biggest thing that will help is communicating with those that are in your life. No matter what the situation is, learn to talk about it, even to strangers. Some of it, depending on how somebody's died or our actions with that person, can tend to not want us to admit or talk about it because of shame and guilt. But it's a great example of moving forward, taking a step so that way the grief moves with you with those steps, but you're not stuck in that black hole. Show love and kindness even when you don't understand it. That's okay. You don't need to understand it. Just be there for the person. Some more to come. But next Saturday might be a pre-recorded session. So because of some of the issues I'm having today, I had to move a couple people around, and so next Saturday got really busy. So I'll probably do a pre-recorded or maybe resurface one from before. And then for sure the following Saturday, the 26th, I will not be doing a video. That's Morgan's birth date, and I will be a mess. So I'm not even going to attempt that day. So I look forward to hearing from you guys. And I said nothing but love and compassion to everybody out there. And that if you're grieving, grieve. It's okay to let others in on it. Let them know you are, so they can understand just a little bit how much pain you're going through.